When you look at the actual impact for most of them, it's a long tail, right? You've got your Kardashians up here, and it's a very skinny pipe of the influencers who can really move for you in terms of sales. And then everybody else, if you really start looking at their numbers, they're not driving a ton.
I'd like to welcome you to the Indie Worldwide podcast. Your name is Dana Todd.
My name is Dana
founder
Todd.
Of Beladana, is that right?
You're the closest so far. It's Beladana.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where does the name come from?
It's going to sound kind of woo-woo, but I was doing some meditation in my spiritual group, and I had been really rethinking like what I wanted to do or be. And by the way, you can do that at any point in your life. I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, now I'm baked. I can't. So I was I think I just turned 50, and I was like, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? And part of that journey led me to the entrepreneurial route again, third time's the charm. And I received this name, and it was just so silly to say out loud, Balodana, 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 Balodana. I found myself saying it over and over again. I'm like, well, that's just dumb enough to stick. Why not? So
there's something for that, just like a word that's sticky in the brain. Like, it probably depends the language you grew up speaking, but I feel like there's certain phonemes that are just stickier.
Yeah. And also,
and in English, it's like Beladana. It's got good rhythm.
It's got a good rhythm, and more importantly,
all voice consonants.
Yeah, for me, I actually received the logo as well. So for me, the logo was very important. It has a lot of circles. It's very womanly, right? But it also has a lot of really nice straight lines, so it's super balanced. So visually, to me, it was kind of like there's a group of artists called the futurists, and they very much combined curves and angles in such a way as to create movement and balance and feminine and positive and masculine energies. So that's really what I was going for there.
I like it. So let's back up a little bit. Tell me, what is Beladana in the first place?
Beladana.
What are you guys doing?
We are the first and only United States market. There's one in Dubai that is 100% made to measure clothing. And what that means is that we do not have inventory. We do not have warehouses. Everything is made on demand. And more importantly, it's made precisely to your body measurements. So if you think of going to a traditional tailor and going for that kind of experience, it's that plus more. So you can literally buy something as simple as this blouse, and $60, boom, you're done. It's made exactly to your body measurements and delivered typically within 2 to 4 weeks.
Do you not need to keep inventory for like the fabric and like the buttons and all the pieces that go into making clothing?
Our makers do. Yeah, our makers do. And some of them offer things in limited supply. Some of them have recurring things. For example, this fabric is actually gone forever and ever, which is great for me because I'm the only one who has it, right? But now we're a marketplace. So we facilitate makers. So we work with makers. We have 12 makers right now in, I'll call it 10 and a half countries, because we just signed up a swimsuit maker in Puerto Rico. So that's not really a state territory, right? So 12 countries, they all do direct delivery. So my job is to run the marketplace, to do the marketing, to help do market education, customer support, and all of those things that make this an easier experience for American women, because women in the U.S. have not typically had this available to them. If you go outside our country, though, it's widely accessible, particularly in Asia. You can walk down the street and have pretty much anything made very cheaply, very quickly. And it's not unusual for things to be made to your body measurements. Here, we can't seem to fathom as consumers like what that looks like and how that's not going to be a $10,000 6-month process, because for most women, all they've had experience in custom is bridal. And that's a very expensive, very time-consuming, very emotional experience. So one of the challenges that we've had is to really try to re-engineer women's brains around adopting this as a slow fashion methodology that's more sustainable and honestly more fun and satisfying in the end.
Slow fashion is a great buzzword. I love it. You came up with slow fashion?
I did not. No, it's a thing long before me, but we think we like the idea of it. Slow fashion means that it's the antithesis of consume, toss, which is what the norm is right now with the fast fashion ethos. And you can, frankly, you can make custom fast. It doesn't have to be that slow.
Yeah.
But it's just not like the term fast fashion came actually because they accelerated the seasons, right? So they literally would send photographers to the fashion shows, take pictures of what was walking down the aisle, relay it back to the factory, and within days they would have a complete, set of sizes available with a knockoff version of that and have it out onto the internet. So that accelerated development and deployment model is uses some of the things that we like, which is data-driven design, right? Which is only small batch. There's a lot of things to love about that model, but there's also a lot of things to hate about that model because they're typically produced in with very poor fabric that falls apart, can't be recycled, and is typically not going to fit well. And it may be made with extremely underpaid labor. So, and that's not just outside the U.S; it's here too.
In my mind, the fast part of fast fashion was like it falls apart fast. Like it's produced quickly and like it falls apart quickly.
Yeah.
Or like something you just buy for the short term. And I never made that connection between like the style being what's fast.
Yeah, because before that, you would be as a designer planning 2 years out for your styles for your seasons. 2 years, because it would take that long to procure the fabric, to get your providers in place, to get everything sized appropriately and planned out, and then produced and then ready to deploy into retail. So 2 years, then they shortened that to about a 1 year cycle, and now with pandemic, it's just all dissolved into chaos right now. So yeah, for me.
Trend, fast fashion, counter trend, slow fashion.
Slow fashion.
Actually, also, could you your mic is brushing up on the collar and it's making some scratchy noises. So say I want to get a blouse made similar to the one you're wearing. How much time do I need to budget? How much money will it cost to get it made?
This particular maker is based in India. They're one of our faster ones. This one is probably around $60, $65, and that includes the shipping on their part. They're very low cost. They're probably our lowest cost provider. And I should also clarify that because we're a marketplace, I don't do a retail markup. So the pricing is low because I don't do a triple retail markup on it. It's literally they set the prices. I take a commission, and that allows them to pay their people better and use better fabric. So for them, this one, their usual turnaround pre-pandemic was 2 weeks. We're seeing a little bit of a delay now because of shipping and fabrics and stuff. So, but they're still typically about 3 weeks or less.
Does that lead to a lot of variability in pricing within the marketplace?
Yeah,
like different manufacturers.
Oh
and
yeah,
different
definitely.
locations?
Yeah, and so one of the things that we learned early on was that it was causing confusion for people when we had them all just kind of thrown in together like a big bazaar. You'd have $1,000, well, we don't have $1,000 blouse. We have like a $350 silk blouse, that's gorgeous Italian fabric made by a Savile Row tailor out of London, and that's sitting next to a $60 blouse. So it was really confusing for consumers as to how to think about that. So one of the things that we did in 2020 when we had some time, and we had some downtime to look at the site, is we actually split them into 2 neighborhoods on our site. So we have custom everyday and then custom couture. So basically everything that's $300 or below goes in the everyday pile, and anything above that goes into couture. And they really are very different products. I mean, I can 100% tell the difference between one of the pieces that we have that's made from a higher end maker, like a really high end maker, versus something that is a little more cheaply made. None of these are, they're not what I call H&M quality. None of these are. I do a lot of work around curating and feedback with our makers to say, what works, what doesn't, what I don't think is going to fly. Our buyers are picky. They're coming to us because they want something to last. They want it to feel good. They want it to be something better than what they can get on the rack.
And how do you make money as the marketplace owner?
So we make money I charge a monthly hosting fee for all of our makers, and then I also charge them a commission.
So if they sell $300 dress, what is the commission that they're paying you?
My take is 20%. So I charge a little bit more than Amazon and Etsy, but I provide more services for that. And they're not in a big crowded marketplace. They get a lot more from working with us. I actually take their samples out, to trunk shows and things like that. So we do have in our financial model a step up where we'll be charging for marketing services and things later on, similar to how Etsy does. And if you actually look at Etsy's structure, I watch them like a hawk, right? So they kind of lure people in with like, oh, we're only going to charge you, I think it's like 5% commission. It's a really low commission amount, but then they start adding in fees, right? So they charge per item listing fee, then they charge you like an AdWords fee, and you don't have any control over your AdWords. So they've been stepping up and stepping up and stepping up their little nickel and dime fees to where they're probably actually charging more than I am. If you actually looked at the total amount of intake. And I've heard that feedback because some of our makers are also selling on Etsy.
Yeah, it seems to me like the original promise of Etsy isn't really fulfilled anymore. Like it seems much less bespoke, to say the least, than
Yeah,
it
well,
used to
and
be.
they try to prevent drop shippers, but they haven't done a great job of policing it. And we have an
Yeah.
explicit term in our merchant agreement that they are not allowed to drop ship. That's like a no-no. You do that, you're out.
Yeah, I get some insight. So my little brother is an Etsy witch. He sells some witch services on Etsy, right?
I didn't
And
know
he
there was
tells
such a
me about
thing.
Etsy. Neither did I. Neither did I.
Etsy
He's
witch.
16 and he's a little hustler and um,
Awesome.
he's coming at it from a very capitalist point of view. So he's like, "Ooh, there's like there's an arbitrage and opportunity here, Anthony. Like the I could drop ship this on Etsy and it's like a 50% difference between what the same exact product is going for on eBay or whatever."
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, all right, dude. Let me know how that goes.
Yeah. Well, and I think
Um,
he's not alone. There are a lot of people doing that right now.
yeah. So I know if there's one little bro, there's probably 1,000 or 5,000 entrepreneurs doing the same thing, and I guess that creates space though for companies like yours where it is more hands-on curation
Yeah.
on like a particular vertical, where then you can also provide more services that are particular to that vertical.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so I think that's pretty cool. So you're providing. So when we were talking previously, you mentioned too like sizing services. So does like the platform take care of getting the measurements right for the people that are buying clothes on
It
Belladonna?
does, and it's something that we're always in the process of perfecting because our system will allow someone to manually input measurements from a tape measure, or they can use a scanning part. We work with 3D Look right now. I have a few other
Mhm.
scanning partners that we're going to be integrating shortly. The challenge with the scanning technology is that it can be very user error prone.
Mm.
It's hard for it to police. Our partners in India, they actually have a physical store there, and they use a very expensive $15,000 closet sized scanner that you go in, and it's
Whoa.
like medical grade, and it thinks very, very precise.
Is this scanning something you've developed in-house, or is it like a third-party provider that you're able to integrate?
Yeah, we work with third parties on that. That's not
Hmm.
something I want to continue to invest in. From what I've seen from
Yeah.
talking to the technology providers over the years, they're all kind of struggling with a business model themselves, right? So it is competitive. A lot of them just get bought very quickly. The very best ones get snapped up immediately. Some of them
Mm.
buy retailers. My goal and what we've
Wow.
been working on is technology that's a little bit different. So it takes a different approach to it. The way I look at it is that
Mhm.
you're going to get scanned a lot more in the future. You are, right? You're just going to be getting scanned, whether it's in your pocket or down at the smart mirror in your
Yeah.
upstairs, or at the retail smart mirror that they have there. So we're building essentially a POS for body scanning companies, so that what happens is we can intake that data and transform it into a common standard that our people work with.
What's like the timeline on this? So right now it seems like you're very much a marketplace company. What you're
Mhm.
talking about is much more like a tech company. Um, do you see this as two separate businesses, one integrated business? Like, what's the timeline for one versus the other?
I don't think of it as something yet that I want to sell, because we have to make sure that it's, even useful for our own needs.
Hmm.
I guess if I have a lot of threads going on right now with the whole body scanning
Yeah.
things. My involvement at the IEEE and OCAC, which is the Open Circle Apparel Coalition, the challenge that we're seeing is that all the body measurements in the world do not necessarily dictate that the pattern will adjust accordingly,
Mm.
because right now, once you get past body scan, all bets are off. There's disconnected systems over there. There's, permutation of the data that may or may not yield exactly what you think you're going to get when you're a consumer getting scanned in the first place. So all those systems have to do something with that data. So we can't do that alone. I'm, a small startup. I don't have the kind of money for that. So working in tandem with a bunch of volunteers all over the world, we're actually trying to put together the pieces in the back end. So for me, that's a rising tide. That's not something that I can or want to own entirely. We have to have an all
Mm.
play on that. There really has to be an industry wide adoption. Really has to be everybody in to the pool. Now, my particular part of this, though, I would ultimately like to put some IP around our ability to take that data and standardize it into something that could then be repurposed. So we're certainly following along and saying, okay, whatever these standards are over here, we're going to bring those over into our system, because we've been using, like everybody, we've got our own standards. Everybody's got their own standards. So we've been making up our own standards. I'm happy to change that as long as we've got consensus and that it can work with the systems that our makers are using.
Seems like there's some potential here where like Amazon has AWS, right? I mean, Beladana has this like body scanning as the like sleeper tech company behind the scenes. People think Amazon makes their money selling books and tchotchkes, but actually they make most of their money providing services to other tech companies. Maybe you could do the same thing.
And logistics, yeah. They make a lot of analytics.
Yeah, and logistics and like a whole host of things, right? But like AWS represents a large portion of their actual like profit margin, right?
Yeah.
Well,
we hope ultimately
margins instead of retail.
Yeah, we are exploring a blockchain component to this. What we have to figure out, though, is everybody wants blockchain. Like, oh, I need a crypto story. Please, God, give me a Web3. We do have one that we're working on, very separate and tangential. But the blockchain, we keep coming back to blockchain on this. Like, could you potentially store your body measurements in blockchain? Would that be useful? And I still think there's something there, but right now it's not adoptable broadly. And
like probably not for like the retail. It doesn't seem to be more useful than just having your measurements.
Exactly.
But maybe for video game integration, like owning an avatar of yourself, could make a little bit more sense. I feel like this blockchain stuff actually makes more sense when you're living an entirely digital life versus when you're kind of trying to marry it with like a physical reality.
Yeah. Well, and you just inadvertently stumbled on the Web3 thing that we're working on.
Okay.
So yeah,
video game clothing.
Well, it's more than that though, because it's not just clothing. There's that at the IEEE, they've just come up with these terms, which I'm kind of liking. I'm going to try to find a way to work in. But so because they couldn't use this term clothing to describe all the things that you can put on your body, they've now gone with this word coveroid. So I know it's a cool word. I'm like, okay. So far I can't find a reason
like
not
Blade
to.
Runner.
It is, right? So we've got humanoids.
Like you slip into your coveroid skin.
Coveroid. So we have coveroids and humanoids, right? So these are two parts. And in your humanoid, you can have your actual representation. And you may want a modified version of that for gaming and for metaverse. But for clothing in real life, you'd want it to be actually fitting your IRL self. So there is, we believe, a market for very high resolution humanoids beyond your personal use, that you could even be using these for commercial licensing.
Yeah, I can imagine like you get a very attractive model who you want to represent your brand. You 3D scan them. You make them postable, right? And then if it's like HD 4K, right, then you can post them however you want to like do your photo shoots or whatever.
Yeah.
Sort of like what my friend Ralph, who I introduced you to, is doing with like Horky and generating models, right?
Yeah.
I want to bring it back a little bit though to like the business of today and how you got to where you are today. So one, like how many vendors are on the platform right now? How many different like manufacturers?
Right now, 12. And we have almost unlimited SKUs, meaning the items, but I restrict it to about between 300 and 500 because I don't want to overwhelm people. Because when you get to permutations, like a suit maker Sumisura, there's 100 different fabrics alone, let alone buttoned configurations.
When a person comes and buys something on Beladana, are they usually buying a particular style, or can they be like, yo, like this is my idea, can you make this?
Both. So the latter that you described is called a bespoke, or it's a true bespoke. Like I have this idea, here's some sketches. So we do a little
like tailored
of that.
Versus bespoke, right?
Yeah. So made to measure. They're all tailored. Okay. But made to measure means that we're following an existing pattern and we're just modifying it to fit your needs, customized to size and maybe some other components like neckline or sleeve or something. Whereas a bespoke is like, we had a woman who was doing a very special TEDx speaking engagement, and she wanted something that would really wow. So she sent us a PowerPoint with all of her mood board stuff, and it was like, I kind of want this. I'm not really sure. And so we worked as a mediator with her and the maker, and they came up with sketches, sent renderings. We did the full, what's called a muslin stage, where you send a disposable version of it to the person to do a try on and make sure it fits, test the fabrics, and get all the approvals before the final piece was done. And it ended up being very elaborate, gorgeous. It was about $500. It had peacock feathers. I mean, this thing was just stunning. It was really stunning. I really made the thing. So that's a bespoke. We don't do a ton of that. I don't necessarily want to do a ton of that. They're good margins for us, right? And the makers, some of them who do this, love it. It's just creative and fun for them. But they are very risky for us, and they're not particularly scalable. So because they're a lot more hands-on. The other part, which is the mainstay, is made to measure. And for that, it's pretty easy. People just like, oh, I need a shirt, or I need something to fit, or I have a party, or whatever. It's usually event-driven. And then they'll just come to us, pick it out. We do have some people who have gone through sometimes a major life transformation or a body transformation. If they've had lap band surgery, for example, and they've had a significant weight loss, they may be struggling. They want to wear something really sexy or form-fitting, but they may still be struggling with their old body in their head, or some pieces that still are providing challenges for them to find off-the-rack clothing. And in that case, then we'll work with them almost as a counselor, like a style counselor, to help them find items.
What kind of volume are we talking about? How many individual items are you selling in a week or a month?
So we're still very small, and I'm not going to throw our sales numbers out here, but we're still very small, and we're all grassroots, man. It's all word of mouth for the most part. SEO. I do a little bit of advertising. I'm just now started ramping it up. I actually turned all the marketing off during pandemic because A, we were conserving cash, and B, nobody was really wearing pants, let alone party dresses, for the last 2 years. So we've just started putting our foot back into the pond for marketing. In that case, we do start seeing this take off, and we'll see our peaks usually are early in the year. Like we have typically a February spike, and then we have one in like the September time frame, August, September, as people think about fall weddings. We're very impacted by wedding season, even though we don't do wedding dresses, because American women like to look good when they go to a wedding.
Yeah. So last September, more or less than like 1,000 dresses made.
Look at you trying to get my numbers out. I would say last September, definitely less than 1,000 dresses.
Less than 1,000. Okay. More than 10?
I can't remember, but let's say it was slightly north of 10.
Okay. So we're somewhere in like the 10 to 100 range.
Yeah,
for
on a monthly basis. Yeah.
Cool. And how long ago did you start Beladana? We're talking like just before the pandemic?
We launched in 2019.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So great timing.
Right.
Just like a very difficult time to start a business.
Yeah, it was really nice. We were seeing, the steady rise, all the numbers that you want to see. When we're bootstrapped, we have some friends and family that helped us get out the door. And we did a national PR tour. We did all the things right. One just can't really expect a pandemic to come along all the time. So I'm really proud of the decisions that we made, though. When we realized that sales were just not going to happen, we turned inwardly and went back to square one and did a lot of user interviews and did all the things that we thought we did before, but maybe could have done better, like, understanding the customer journey and some of those impacts, and then making investments into our technology, and completely reinvented the look and feel. We did a refresh on that, and really kind of changed a lot of approach to our navigation and stuff. So, yeah.
Are you a solo founder? Do you have any co-founders?
I do have a co-founder, Nisha. She's living in Germany right now, so she's not able to put as much time in as she used to. But it does fall heavily on me, as she's the brand genius. She's the one who makes things beautiful.
Are you guys, so she's part-time, you're full-time. Do you have any employees? You work with contractors? How do you get things done?
Yeah, we use contractors only. But you know what? I did that even before my startup. Like, I was a chief marketing officer. And it's really funny, like, pandemic didn't bother me for virtual. I've been working virtual for years. I worked at an international telecommunications company, and 90% of our workforce was distributed and virtual and all over the world. So in fact, that's how I really got comfortable with Eastern Europe as a market, both for development and for getting our clothes. Our clothes are gorgeous coming out of Eastern Europe.
Nice. And are you guys profitable yet? Are you able to pay yourselves?
Nope. Still in the investment phase.
Yeah. Have you guys done like any like formal rounds? It's just been like friends and family so far?
We have not. I keep getting this close every time. The challenge is, is like there's this magic sweet spot when you're still young and fresh, and right out of the gate you can raise based on the idea and the dream of the team, right? But then once you're past that 3-year mark, and we just passed it, right? So then you have to start showing a little bit more traction in your milestones. And so the challenge for us is that the pandemic impacted our sales cycle so badly that that we're having to sort of rebuild from there. But it's going to take a particular kind of investor for us. When we did actually, was it 2019? We were doing some investigations in early 2020 with funders, and they're just largely not getting it. We don't have anybody else out there besides Etsy to compare ourselves to, right? So it's not like this is an easy SaaS thing where you just drop it into a spreadsheet and, does this model work? We're a very different model. So I think it is a challenge for a lot of investors. They have to have a passion for the space or have a passion for solving the problem of poorly made clothes and poorly fitting clothes. It is a monstrous issue. We've been lucky. We've found a lot of people on the build side who think like us, who've done the numbers. They're seeing that the financial impact of clothes being returned based on fit it's around $500 billion. It's 40% of all returns of clothing are based on fit issues. It's massive. It's really massive.
Yeah. Well, my bias is probably a little bit towards the bootstrapper,
And I hear that. And that's honestly, that's one of the reasons why I really love your community, because it's not about just like hype cycles. It really is like, you can do this, just go sell 1,000 bars. That's my spirit animal, the guy who started RX bars, those little protein bars. He's from Chicago. I got to give love to this guy. Every time I get frustrated, or one of my colleagues, my accountability buddies is like, why? I'm just like, go sell 1,000 bars. I don't know. Do you know that story of this guy?
No, this is the first time hearing about it.
It's brilliant. I
know the brand, like the RX bar brand.
So he was a young guy, and he had this idea for a startup, and he goes to his dad, and he was like, hey, Dad, can I have $10,000 to start this company? And his dad's like, no. It's like, go sell 1,000 bars and then come back to me. And so he went out and he figured it out. He went to CrossFit and started, putting them in there, and he got the CrossFit people to adopt it, and they loved it, right? And then so once CrossFit does anything, they're very mouthy. They love to tell their friends about everything. So they basically did the word of mouth for him. He sold 1,000 bars and learned a lot, changed the formula, made some changes to the product, and then came back to his dad and was like, all right, I sold 1,000 bars. But by that point, he already had, a working model and
He'd had $1,000 worth of sales, 1,000 bars worth of sales.
There you go. So
maybe around $1,000 too, just because
probably they're not very expensive. But
what's your 1,000 bars strategy? How are you selling clothing right now?
So we know that in order for us to be swimming along, we need to be pulling in about 10,000 sales per month. So that's my true north. That's my 1,000.
Units or dollars?
Units.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, 20% margin, right? So I need to sell 10,000 items. Some of the good things that we have found, though, is, and I should probably go back and adjust those a bit, but our average cart size is well over $300. So we had in our original projections, we were figuring cart size to be about 190 based on what we saw with Stitch Fix and some of these other services. But with what we're typically finding is that it's about $302. But for the sake of just being,
10,000 is a lot better of a number, like psychologically, I think, than 6,000, which maybe it would adjust down to.
Yeah. And we also want to be cognizant that we may not always have that high cart value, because right now it's a very curated sale. We're helping them out, and they're often buying multiple items, whereas in the future, people, might be just buying more one-offs. But we do have return customers, which is really nice to see. That makes me super happy.
Yeah. How are people finding out about you, or how are you finding them?
Some of them find us on the internet. Some of them find us word of mouth. A lot of them I have personally met out there doing these physical marketplaces. One of the things that we've found is that, especially with a higher end purchase like this, we're actually not selling a product. We're selling a service. And that's why we don't work in a retail environment. We made a lot of mistakes our first year figuring out, our 1,000 bars was we figured out, don't put yourself in a retail environment, because people who are in grab and go mode are not going to sit down and hear your story. Don't necessarily put yourself in an artisan market that isn't attuned to a particular demographic, right? So if we're sitting next to the homemade soaps, maybe if it's the right market,
Yeah.
but maybe not, right? So, but getting out there and letting women touch the fabrics, because we were, like I said, we have people walk over and touch our stuff and they're like, oh my God, where did you get this? You know, we have stuff that you can't find at Macy's or Nordstrom. It's so high quality and they're really flabbergasted when they look at the price tag.
Are you shopping just in like the fashion district, or you have like, are you going to India?
I went to Romania. That's where I actually found our first buyers, the Romania, or our makers in Romania and Moldova. I find people on Etsy. Sometimes they reach out to me. We do a fair amount of outreach, you know, and I stalk them. I look for whether they've got good ratings.
Are your makers handling their own? Like, are your makers the ones going and sourcing their materials? Or are you like sourcing materials for them?
No, I don't source anything for them, but I do provide input, right? So if I get a return and, you know, and it's based on fabric, or I look at some of their samples, I'm like, this is not going to work for our buyer. We'll let them know to either upgrade their fabric or, you know, stop carrying
So
that.
you find somebody on Etsy you think is cool, you reach out to them. What's the process for getting them onboarded? Do they need to send you stuff first?
They do. Yeah. We want to look at their samples. And sometimes that helps us weed things out. We can tell I weeded out somebody who was ostensibly making custom-made sweaters, which were really mass-produced. Another one that looked great in the pictures, but you looked at the stitching and it was just like very amateur. So we need it to be a certain aesthetic and a certain value that we know is going to, our sophisticated buyer is going to be able to tell the difference. So we look at their samples, we look at their background, we want to know about their making process, we want to see pictures of their studio, right, or their manufacturing plant, whatever they have. We want to know that we also want to talk to them about their sustainability practices. What are you doing? Are you working towards zero waste? Are you using sustainable fabric? We're not branding ourselves as a sustainable fashion company because that carries a lot of extra weight for certification, but we do have a preference for companies that are doing these practices.
Yeah, I feel so putting myself in your shoes as like, oh, I own Beladana, I want to market it. Like, I feel like I'd be really drawn towards like influencers, you know, like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, like finding these people who talking about fashion, trying to get them to tell the story of like, oh, like my clothing didn't fit. And so I found Beladana and I got my measurements made and look at this like beautiful piece that I got back.
I have been really challenged with influencers and I'm not sure why. Part of it is because we don't have a simple thing for them to do, right? For many of them, the way they work is you just send them merch, they put it on, they do a little show, and bada bing, everybody's paid, go home. They're not necessarily, unless you're investing in them and that process, unless they're investing their time in that process, then, you know, it's not necessarily working with everybody. And now the cost of it, they typically want, in addition to whatever you work, you know, the cost of the product itself, they're going to want a spiff on top of that as well. And some of them want commission, which is fine. I'm happy to pay commission. But it does start adding up. And then when you look at the actual impact for most of them, it's a bit of it's not even it's a long tail, right? You've got your Kardashians up here, and it's a very skinny pipe of the influencers who can really move for you in terms of sales. And then everybody else, if you really start looking at their numbers, they're not driving a ton. So you either have to have a high producing small set of makers and you're paying them well, or you need to have a lot of people working overtime for you who are basically doing an awareness play for you, which is going to tip the boat. But it's just hard for me to justify if I'm paying, let's say, $300 out to get their custom made dress, and then I'm going to have to pay them another $200 or $300 on top of that. So there's my $600 out plus all the time and effort, right? And dealing with that. And if they only sell 2 dresses, which is statistically high, honestly, unless they're a pretty high influencer, so on that $300 dress, I made $40. I could take that $600 and just drop it into ads.
I don't think you can afford to pay them, right? You got to figure out a way to like either create a format for them that they can copy, right? So like I think of like Shine, you know, like the hyper fast fashion, right? And these TikTokers will do Shine haul videos where they just buy a bunch of junk from Shine for like $50 and then they dump it out and it like clicks well.
Yeah. And that's a whole different aesthetic for us. And our
budget, it's very different. So like that's the trend. Like what's the exact opposite of that? Is it also interesting? Have you tried like giving away like bespoke clothing to influencers, being like, oh my gosh, like, oh, I love your look, like give me your measurements, we'll send you something cool?
Not broadly, but we've done a couple of one-offs like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any kind of outcome from those, or
no? That's why I'm
not?
saying I'm really skeptical of this technique.
Yeah. Fair enough. Like, this is my brainstorm without like having tried it, right? So it's like,
yeah, we made a lot of mistakes. We invested a whole lot of money in 2019 on things that just did not move the needle for us. They really didn't. Even like all the way up to national magazines and stuff. So yeah,
like running ads, like print ads.
No, we did some of that too, and those. We haven't found any trackable evidence that those work necessarily. But no, I'm talking about actually making stuff for editors and getting them to review you in a national magazine. So we got the coverage, but no buyers. The ultimate growth for us is actually not going to look like Beladana now. There'll be a version in the future which has on-demand manufacturing of these things. It'll still be made to measure, but it may not all be nice little artisan people living in Lithuania. It may be a tech-driven process that utilizes even a United States-based on-demand manufacturing cell.
See where you get to wanting to really own some IP then around being like the body scanning company, so that when big retail moves in, like they're not going to be working with your mom and pops, but they might want to use your like scanning technology and like the process of.
But to be honest, I'd really like to make this possible as supportive tech for small to medium sized businesses. The challenge there is there's not a lot of the artisans out there just have no interest in technology. They don't want to sit down and learn 3D programming. Why would they? There is a dearth, not just here, but everywhere, a dearth of people who can do fashion technology, right? People who are doing, we'll call them garment engineers. Like, that's not even a thing, but it needs to be a thing, because right now we just call them pattern makers. And that's like so cute and patronizing. What they do is friggin' engineering. It really is. And it's astonishing somehow.
Yeah. I mean, I think treating fashion as an engineering discipline, it makes a lot of sense. Like, historically, the ancestor of the computer is the loom, actually, like, computers and like everything we're doing now evolved out of the desires.
I didn't know
needs
that.
Of fashion.
That's a cool concept.
Yeah. Well, I think it's cool. Like, I want to be able to go into like even just like Uniqlo, be like, scan me, bro, get turned around, and then have all the clothes then come out like tailored exactly for my like unique and sometimes strange body proportions.
Well, LG has designs on that already. They had a thing that came out from CES a few years ago, and you can see there's sort of futuristic smart mirror that does two things. It scans you, it holds your preferences, it looks at the inventory out there and makes recommendations. It's got a virtual try-on. I mean, it's the ultimate dream, right? But I've been in the business now for a whopping 3 years, and I see all the issues with the back end of that. So that's what we're all working towards, is trying to plug those holes to make that reality.
All right, so to wrap it up here, say there's a hopeful entrepreneur listening now. They want to get into fashion. They want to build a business in the fashion industry. What advice would you give them in particular?
Get really hands-on. Coming in as an outsider, I had a lot of presuppositions that were wrong, that were very wrong. And I'm not saying you have to go out there and become an actual sewist yourself, but the more you know about the process and the more you can, as part of your first 1,000 bars, make those first 1,000 bars as well. You're going to learn a lot about that, and you're going to make a lot of mistakes. But along the way, you'll also make a lot of friends. And so I think this is a very disconnected and fragmented industry, and you should know that going in. But it's also, for the most part, on the make side of stuff, a pretty friendly group of people who are willing to share, because we're all feeling the same struggles. I would also say that there is a distinct difference between the art side of fashion, which is what you see in the glossies and at the Met Gala. That is quite separated from the manufacturing side of things. Like, it is a chasm. The two don't even communicate for the most part. So you need to decide where you want to live, because it's really hard to straddle.
So if you want to work with the designers, go to the fashion show. If you want to work in the actual production of clothing, go to the manufacturing lines.
Yeah, it's a very different world, quite different. Yeah, I had no idea how big a difference it really was. That was my very first lesson And being a nerd and not a politician or a celebrity, I was like, I'll go hang out with the makers because that's really where I'm going to solve, I think.
Yeah, that's surprising. So like designers just bring their designs to the makers and then they're gone.
Yeah, they literally bring in a shitty sketch or whatever and like, here, make this, And then they think like elves make it all happen.
Yeah.
But it's a really complicated process.
Yeah. That could be good for part 2. All right. Where should people go to follow your story and learn more about you?
You can find us on Instagram at Balodana, Balodana, or go to our website, sign up for our emails. We do have awesome emails, I have to say. I love our emails. We really take a lot of pride in them, crafting stories and doing transformation things. And that's at balodana.com, Balodana.com. And you can find us on all the socials. You can find me ranting about feminist issues at Dana Todd on Twitter. That's my other jam, just yelling.
Well, Dana Todd, thank you very much for coming on to the podcast today. It was a pleasure talking to you.